Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for today's update. Of course, we wish we were meeting in person. However, we truly appreciate your support for Australia and the North America market by joining us for this virtual Australia marketplace. Today, I'd like to give you an update on the market, what we've been doing over recent months as this crisis has unfolded, and our approach, both while restrictions remain in place and what we're doing to plan for recovery. There will be an opportunity at the end to ask questions. We know the biggest question, of course, remains when Australia will reopen to international visitors. Unfortunately, we don't at this stage have a timeline on that, but our goal is to ensure that we are ready to act quickly as soon as restrictions are lifted to support as strong a recovery as possible. Many of our team will be participating in this event and we'll introduce them throughout the program, and they'll also be on hand at the end to answer any questions. We had a lot of positive momentum approaching 2020. In the year to December, we achieved the milestone of more than 1 million visitors from the US and Canada combined, up 44% over the past 5 years. We had seen growth and were very well served in terms of aviation capacity, with more than 140 direct services a week from the US and Canada to Australia, with Qantas, of course, and Virgin, and all of the major North American carriers serving the market. Notably, many travellers from the US and Canada to Australia also use indirect options. We were looking forward to further growth with the addition of new Qantas services from San Francisco and Chicago to Brisbane. Qantas was evaluating non-stop services from New York as part of its Project Sunrise, which would have been a major breakthrough from the east coast of the US. Heading into 2020, that momentum was disrupted with the bushfires and the significant media coverage that generated across North America. From late January through February, we conducted an 11-city industry and media roadshow across North America, and through the course of that, there was great renewed interest and optimism about the year ahead. Of course, we didn't know what shortly thereafter was in store with COVID. It has, of course, been a very difficult and tumultuous year. These charts from the New York Times show the trajectory in new cases across the US and Canada. Both countries are facing an uptick in new cases as we approach the winter months, albeit Canada off a far lower base. The pandemic has, of course, caused huge economic challenges and devastating impacts to sectors such as ours in tourism and hospitality. In the US, the third quarter, though, showed perhaps better than expected recovery in some sectors, with headline unemployment returning to single digits. The stock market has also proved relatively resilient, led by large tech companies that have benefited from the growth of internet and acceleration of digital transformation of businesses. Of growing concern, of course, is that the recovery has been uneven, and despite more than $3 trillion of government stimulus in the US, with potentially more to come, the inequality gap is widening. In Canada, the government has pledged billions of dollars of additional support to extend the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy to the summer of 2021 and create 1 million new jobs and support businesses in hard-hit sectors. From a tourism industry perspective, distribution channels are suffering severely due to the border restrictions, with a current estimated unemployment rate of more than 50% across the US travel industry. Many businesses are being forced to hibernate and operators are being forced to diversify in order to survive, with early signs of consolidation. Many of you, our partners, consistently report there is pent-up demand. And this certainly seems to be the case for domestic travel and where travel is still permitted. There was a report yesterday that the TSA screened more than 1 million passengers on Sunday, the highest number and the first, over the 1 million threshold screened in a single day since March 17. So that's certainly encouraging. We understand, though, it is difficult to retain or secure future bookings and manage consumer expectations due to the uncertain timing for borders to reopen. Many facets of North American life have been significantly disrupted by stay-at-home orders, but there are areas where consumers have quickly adapted and brands are acting on opportunities to interact in different ways, including the boom in online content consumption, delivery, grocery and meal delivery, sports bubbles, different ways of providing entertainment. As travel slowly reopens, there is a focus on staycations and local or domestic trips. Companies are focusing more on safety and flexibility in their messaging. Next Wednesday, our media agency, will present on the trends in consumer behaviour and media that we're seeing. So please tune in for that. These slides show data from our consumer sentiment survey, which we're conducting throughout this crisis to track trends and inform our approach to when and how to resume marketing activity to sustain interest in Australia while restrictions remain in place and support as fast a recovery as possible when borders reopen. US consumer confidence improved in September while case numbers were not getting any worse. Confidence and travel intention has ebbed and flowed a lot over the last 6 months as consumers have adjusted to the phases of opening and closing domestically and internationally as case numbers have varied. Intention to book held steady in the past month, with 9% of Americans very likely or certain to book an international holiday somewhere in the next month. This possibly reflects the increasing level of pent-up demand. It could also reflect more confidence in response to changes in the marketplace around travel partners implementing policies of no change fees, refunds on bookings, increased safety protocols, and cleanliness. With respect to attitudes to Australia, almost 60% of Americans would like to travel to Australia, just not now. And our approach during this phase of lockdown is to try to sustain that high latent demand. Canadian confidence was down a little in the most recent survey, perhaps reflecting concerns about the second wave of cases in Canada. Immediate booking intention for international travel is low, but encouragingly, a high 64% of respondents would like to travel to Australia. We strongly believe a proactive approach in both the sustain and grow phases is critical for the North American market. There is typically a long lead time from planning and booking to departure, so it's important that we continue to invest in driving consideration and inspiring future travel while borders remain closed in order to be able to rebuild demand quickly when we have a timeline to reopen. We believe that Australia will have many advantages coming out of this crisis. We perennially rank top of Americans' bucket lists of destinations they most want to visit, and our challenge has always been driving a sense of urgency to go now. Coming out of such a historic crisis, we anticipate that people will have more of a you only live once mentality and want to act on their bucket list out of a growing realization that you never know what's around the corner and when you may be unable to do what you've always wanted to do. Australia also offers the experiences we expect the post-COVID traveller to seek: wide open spaces, nature and wildlife, cleanliness and safety, first-rate infrastructure. We will, however, have a challenge in that some other destinations are likely to reopen before we do. So we need to continue to evolve our messaging and approach to be relevant and cut through. We also need to plan so that we're ready to act quickly when we do get clarity on the timeline for borders reopening so that we can rebuild demand quickly and effectively support you, the industry, in rebuilding your businesses. I spoke earlier about the momentum we had at the end of last year as we approached 2020. Our approach currently is to try to sustain that interest from both our consumer and industry audiences to be as ready as possible when travel resumes. We've focused on social and content marketing that enables us to adapt our messaging and be responsive to the needs of our consumer. We've found a significant appetite for virtual and inspirational content. You may be familiar with the Live from Oz promotion that we ran a few months ago. The US had more live stream views than any other region at 2.4 million views of the event itself over the weekend that it ran, and an additional more than 2.6 million views of the content post-event. Canada also had more than 4 million post-event views of the content. The promotion also generated significant media coverage with more than 712 million impressions and an equivalent advertising value of more than $3.5 million, with coverage in National Geographic, Forbes, Thrillist, and more. Some of that content is available through the Marketplace platform, so please do check it out. I'll play a short video shortly recapping that promotion, but first I'd also like to highlight a recent content partnership. We had a huge editorial win at the end of last year when influential travel publication Travel and Leisure announced Australia as Destination of the Year for 2020. This included a cover feature in its December edition, which was launched in November of last year, and digital and social promotion. Travel and Leisure has more than 6 million magazine readers, more than 11.5 million monthly unique visitors to its website, and several million followers on each of Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We originally planned a full funnel campaign in partnership with our state and territory partners to leverage this influential endorsement, from providing support to maximise the editorial coverage to a paid campaign with conversion layers and a Travel and Leisure Advisory Board trip that was planned to take place as part of ATE this year. Obviously, that plan had to change, but we were able to pivot the campaign to focus on inspirational content over the past few months. And that campaign drove more than 7.5 million digital campaign impressions from June to September, with strong engagement with the content. So now I'd just like to play a recap of the Live from Oz promotion.
We have faced the most challenging period in the history of Australian tourism over the last 6 months.
What about touring Australia this weekend from the comfort of your own home?
You're invited to experience the best of Australia with a virtual getaway this weekend.
In a 2-day bonanza, viewers will be virtually transported to various destinations right around the country.
A big welcome to the Love Australia project.
Tonight's special actually kicks off what is going to be a bumper weekend for discovering Australia virtually, and here is what you can expect.
Welcome to Live from Oz.
Welcome to Currumbin Wildlife Sanctuary on the beautiful Gold Coast.
Welcome to Shark Bay. Welcome to the Northern Territory.
Welcome to the Kimberley.
Welcome to beautiful Bondi Beach.
Travel again, I think the only option is that you all come and visit us.
Come and join us.
If you are in Oz, do go out and see wherever you can in our incredible country.
Unawanga. Talk to you later. Catch ya.
We'll see you again on the next video what we make.
So we're now planning our approach for the remainder of the year, and we have some exciting new content, including a range of immersive 8D videos, which we're featuring in a current 4-week social and programmatic media promotion. These videos feature amazing imagery and a really immersive audio experience, and they're available to use in your own marketing channels. So please do let the team know if you're interested. And again, those videos are accessible through the Marketplace platform for you to check out. Over the coming months, we will promote new content that will be released monthly on oz.com and australia.com and owned social channels. Key themes through the rest of the year will be those 8D videos which showcase destinations around Australia, nature and wildlife, and sustainable travel. Throughout this crisis, we've had a very proactive PR program, and there's been significant interest in virtual and inspirational content. As I mentioned, a highlight was the Live from Oz promotion, but PR will continue to be a key focus, and we're looking at how to evolve our messaging and to be relevant and cut through in a crowded news environment, and certainly showcasing, the best inspirational and virtual content. And a lot of industry partners have produced really, really great content, throughout the months, and so we're certainly looking to showcase that. Our pivot to a virtual industry engagement and education program has also been really effective. You can see here some of the highlights of our Aussie Specialist activity. And we're delighted that we've been able to boost the number of qualified Aussie specialists throughout North America through this period to around 3,200. And we've trained 14,000 agents over the year to June. So we've actually found that while the travel restrictions have been in place, a lot of advisors have been looking to use the downtime to upskill and be sure to be as ready as they can be when travel resumes. So we want to certainly equip them with all they need to sell Australia effectively when it is possible. We've seen really strong engagement with virtual events, from a virtual product showcase that we ran in July to this, our first virtual Australia marketplace. So we really appreciate your support of all of these activities. We have continued to leverage our core consortia partnerships that allow us to reach the vast North America retail network at scale. Our 3 consortia partners have a combined network of approximately 65,000 travel advisors, and between them represent approximately 40% of all travel agency businesses. So our work with these partners is focused on B2B initiatives to continue to inspire and educate on Australia. For business events, we've also pivoted to a virtual industry engagement and education program. The situation has been very tough for planners as they continue to postpone and recontract and move to virtual or hybrid events. But international projections are for a recovery from 2022 and beyond for events. And the good news is that leads are coming in for Australia for 2022 and beyond, and pent-up demand we anticipate will be high. And all of those reasons in terms of Australia's safety and the types of experiences Australia offers that will be appealing in a post-COVID travel environment, and first-rate infrastructure, and just being a highly aspirational, and we anticipate will position Australia very well as a business events destination once restrictions are lifted. While doing what we can to sustain interest while border restrictions are in place, we are also doing all we can to move quickly when restrictions are lifted. We will continue to focus on the high-value traveller who is interested in the types of experiences that Australia offers, from nature and wildlife to incredible food and wine and aquatic and coastal experiences. The US has historically also been the largest source market for premium travel, and we anticipate that this group of travellers will have a high propensity to resume travel quickly when restrictions are lifted. We will upweight our consumer marketing as we near reopening. And we're also planning ahead to ascertain the opportunities for media hosting and broadcast and ways to leverage our Friends of Australia relationships, again, to hit the ground running when restrictions are lifted. The recovery approach will involve a very heavy focus on partnership. These will fall into 3 categories. Airline, of course, reinstatement of aviation capacity is absolutely critical to the recovery. OTA and KDP, or key distribution partner programs. These will be conversion-focused partnership campaigns that will be key to stimulating immediate demand during initial stages of restart and supporting our key industry partners. In addition, we'll shift our focus in our distribution development to focus on recovery messaging and the information needed to allow our partners to sell with confidence when borders reopen. So we'll be talking more about, as time goes on, more about these initiatives with you. For business events, we'll also pivot to a recovery strategy, which will include destination showcases and a business events ambassador program, which borrows from an idea that worked very successfully for our Aussie Specialist program a few years ago. So in summary, as frustrating as the restrictions are for everyone, our goal is to keep the dream of an Aussie vacation alive for our consumer audiences, to continue to engage and support our industry partners, and have plans in place to act quickly when borders reopen to support as quick and as strong a recovery as possible. And we certainly look forward to working with all of you to ensure those plans are as effective as possible. So thank you for joining us for this update. And now I'd like to bring the team on, and also just to answer any questions, and happy to take any questions that you've submitted.
Cool, thanks Jane, and hi everyone. I'm going to help facilitate our Q&A session today. I can see a bunch of questions in here, so we've gone through our update quite quickly, so we have got lots of time to answer any of your questions. Also, just a reminder that we'll Pip, our Managing Director, will be joining us tomorrow for our opening session, and there'll also be a chance to ask her questions as well if we're not able to answer some of your particular questions, but we'll definitely endeavour to do so. So we will kick into these. So let's have a look. Let me just pick one first. So question from Sunny Rossi. Hi Sunny, good to see you on here. Sunny's question is, will we have access to the new videos so we can forward them to our clients? Sunny, I think you're particularly referring to some of the new 8D videos that we showed, and some of the new content that we'll be producing over the coming months. Jackie, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So we do have a video resource hub that's actually located at videos.australia.com. And then we also have a resources hub too, that's resources.australia.com. So that is a whole new resource that we've created that you can access all of our assets. In addition, we have all of the assets that are actually uploaded onto our YouTube account, which has recently been refreshed. So you are able to share out those links directly as well.
Cool, that's great. Sonny, if you have anything more to ask on that one, just pop the question back in, and we'll pick that up. Gail Sherman, hi Gail, how are you? Question, there's a couple of questions here on just a general status of border opening and timeframes. Jane, I don't know if you want to address that just broadly at this particular stage.
Yes, so at the moment we don't have a definitive timeline on borders reopening, and the Minister for Tourism, Trade and Investment, Simon Birmingham, has made comments recently that it would likely take for markets like the US and others a vaccine or significant breakthrough in the management of COVID. So what that looks like is not definitive at the moment, but we are certainly having a lot of discussions with the relevant government authorities to make sure they're fully informed of what's happening in terms of the industry, and certainly that we're feeding in what other destinations are doing, and the general environment. So there's a lot of attention going to what are the potential pathways to safely reopen, but at the moment we don't have a definitive timeline or view of what that looks like.
And I would say, in addition to that, we do have a COVID safe travel portal that is available on australia.com. So we are updating that as frequently as possible. It was just launched last month, but it's a really great resource to find out more information on which domestic, state and territory borders are open. And then we'll also have announcements there too when we have a closer idea of international openings.
Good.
Thanks, Jackie. The next question here is from Mike King. Hi, Mike. Mike's question is, what is the status for Virgin Australia for recovery? I'm happy to take that one. So I think in regards to Virgin Australia, Mike, they're just obviously just finalising their takeover by Bain Capital. They're still continuing to fly within domestic Australia. I think as far as we understand, they're Immediate strategies will be particularly focused on restoring their domestic business and then looking at their short-haul markets. They have publicly stated that they're divesting of their 777 long-haul fleet and exiting from long-haul flying for the time being. So given their kind of aircraft fleet scenario, I wouldn't anticipate we'd see Virgin back into this market for, you know, at least 2 or 3 years at minimum. As far as we understand, it's not on their radar right now to restore any of their long-haul capacity. We did catch up with our partners at Delta Airlines the other day, and they continue to remain committed to the market. They are continuing to fly to Australia at the moment. They're continuing to increase their capacity. They'll be operating daily into Sydney from December. And they intend to maintain a strong partnership with Virgin Australia to support dispersal from their gateway in Sydney to get customers across the country on the Virgin domestic network. So still some good opportunities there. But in terms of their long haul flying, I don't think we'll see them back into this market for quite a period of time at this particular stage. So I hope that answers your question on Virgin. If there's anything we didn't cover there, please pop a question back in there, Mike, and we'll try and answer that for you.
And I would just add that the one of the key things, you know, throughout this situation, we're talking to all of the major airline partners on a regular basis, you know, to look at how we can, you know, support them, you know, through this period, but also in particular in the recovery phase, because obviously aviation recovery is absolutely critical to tourism recovery, and so you will have the opportunity tomorrow to hear from Qantas and United on the Future of Aviation panel, and we, you know, that's absolutely a key part of planning for recovery.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. Lots of questions still coming in here, so that's great. Monique Bayer, hi Monique. Your question is, when we can reopen, will Tourism Australia provide guides for operators for what COVID-safe operations look like? So Jane, I can pick the first part of that one up if you've got anything to add. So Monique, we'll actually have a session dedicated to COVID-safe tourism. That will take place on Thursday morning, I think. Yeah, Thursday morning. Sorry, Thursday before the market, our pre-session before appointments. So that session, we'll actually have a couple of operators joining us to talk about their experiences of how they're operating in a COVID-safe manner in Australia. So our colleagues from AET Kings and the Sealink Travel Group. We're also going to be having the Australian Tourism Export Council join us as well. They're doing a significant amount of work within Australia across all the states in supporting operators with guidelines based on the state and federal government guidelines around how they can operate safely. So I definitely recommend you tune into that session to understand more about what's happening right now. I think it's fair to say, though, that when our borders do open more broadly, the situation may change, it may evolve, things may look quite different. So I think, as Jackie mentioned before, we've created this really fantastic resource on australia.com, our COVID Safe portal, and that will really be the key place where we provide the latest information in terms of any particular restrictions that are going on in Australia, but also provide that information around some of those safety messages and access to the information in terms of how our partners in Australia are operating in a COVID safe way. Jane, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that summarises it. Yeah.
Thank you. So Monique, I hope that answers that particular question, but if not, again, just pop something back in here and we can recover that one for you. Let's have a look. So question here from Colette. Are you anticipating new protocols for ETA submissions, so the electronic visa authorization for Australia when the borders do open? I guess it's probably too early to anticipate any changes to that at this stage, Jane, right?
Not aware of any at this point, but yeah, we can take that on notice. Certainly to communicate if there are any changes that we become aware of.
Yeah. Cool, thank you. And
I think, you know, just as a Jackie mentioned, you know, the COVID portal on oz.com. I think we will, you know, continue to use australia.com as a repository of all information as we kind of, you know, navigate the situation. So I think, you know, with respect to updates on domestic border reopenings and, you know, eventual international border reopenings and any changes, you know, or updates or developments, I think that is a really good resource to refer to, because we'll make sure that any new developments and information are housed there to help people kind of understand what the latest news is.
Yeah, cool, thank you. Question from Ray, probably more for you, Jackie, I think. In terms of our consumer sentiment surveys, where are they undertaken? Is it just in California, or do we take a spread across the country?
We do take a spread across the country for those. Yeah. So we currently are running the surveys for all the international markets on a monthly basis. So we do continue to track consumer sentiment and see how it's been changing throughout COVID with all the external factors as well going on with lockdowns in different countries, changes in the economy, et cetera.
Cool. Thank you. Sarah, hi Sarah, your question, Sarah Ang, your question is, have we seen the American market take up any virtual tours and experiences operated by Australian operators this year? So I think from a advisor distribution partner perspective, absolutely. I think we've seen really strong interest in leveraging those opportunities. And Chris, I think you'll agree from a media and consumer perspective, we're also seeing similar interest, right?
Yes, absolutely. So anecdotally, you know, we've heard from all of the editors at top publications that are key for our market. So Travel and Leisure, Condé Nast Traveler, those sort of consumer travel publications that are still very keen on keeping the dream of destinations like Australia alive, and their readers are certainly taking part in some of the great Australian experiences that we have on offer. So yeah, absolutely.
I think, Chris, also on the business event side of things, there have been planners that have been attending virtual familiarizations through some of our DMCs and through our Spotlight on Australia broadcast that we've had. So the DMCs have told us about really interesting, you know, fam trips where they, you know, where they take them with an iPhone, like even through the venues and things like that. And it's gone over really well. So that's great. They are interested, they want to see it. And there've been some really creative things happening in the business event space too.
I think the interest, you know, throughout the Live from Oz and also after the event itself, you know, in terms of accessing their content on demand, just shows, you know, how much appetite there is in particular in this market for that kind of content. And also there have been, you know, many great examples of virtual content that, you know, that industries produced that we've highlighted on australia.com in the section on inspirational content as well. So yeah, absolutely do continue to make us aware of any great examples of that, because there's definitely interest from both consumer and industry audiences.
Yeah, cool, thank you. So Sarah, I hope that answers your question, but again, if not, just pop something back in the Q&A, we can come back to that one. So a question here from Brian Hennessy. Hi Brian. His question is, what time lag do we foresee between borders opening and the first people arriving? I guess, and he said, I understand a lot depends on aviation, etc. But what would be our best guess?
I mean, we don't know what the timeline for announcing, well, obviously for borders reopening or how much notice we will have. I suppose it does, you know, depend on what that, you know, breakthrough in the management of the situation looks like. I think, you know, in our communication with the relevant, you know, government decision makers, we're certainly communicating that for a market, you know, like North America, you know, the more notice, obviously, the better. But I think why we are putting so much focus, in addition to kind of sustaining, you know, demand throughout this period, but also having, you know, plans, you know, as developed as they can be to activate as soon as we have that announcement. We're doing that so that we can, you know, maximize the speed to market when we do have an announcement, because we know there'll be a big job to rebuild demand. We expect there will be a lot of pent-up demand, but we need to be as ready as possible to hit the ground running when we do have that announcement.
Yeah, cool, thank you. Okay, we've got more questions here. Vasile, hey Vasile. So Vasile's question is, once restrictions are lifted, we just mentioned that TA has some plans of turning our focus from awareness conversion. Do we have specific plans in working with wholesales and travel agents to create incentives to increase arrivals to Australia? And what percentage of arrivals do you anticipate to see in year one since restrictions being lifted compared to 2019 numbers? So in terms of the short answer is yes, we are looking to do that, Vasile, and we haven't defined the specific plans yet, but as Jane was mentioning in her presentation, working with those 3 core segments and our airline partners and our distribution partners in particular, we see is really important to support our overall recovery efforts and stimulate as much conversion in as short a space of time as possible, as well as building further out booking demand is going to be a really key job for us to do in collaboration with our partners. So absolutely yes, we will be doing that. To what those plans look like and how we do that, we're still kind of working behind the scenes on that one. So we'll definitely be able to share. We will be sharing with our relevant partners once we develop that. And then in terms of your question on the percentage of arrivals, Jane, I think that's going to really very much depend on how aviation capacity is restored and what type of demand we're seeing more broadly in this market, right?
Yeah, I think it's probably too early until we kind of know the time frame to estimate that. But I mean, certainly we do have a global project, I suppose, that is that's pulling in, as well as information from these consumer sentiment surveys, all the information resources that we can access, on data in terms of what's happening in our key markets, to sort of inform as we move through the stages of this crisis to assess, what the opportunity, looks like when we do hit recovery. But I think, that point that I mentioned, that, even though borders are very slowly reopening, that, the travel, through TSA checkpoints, is really picking back up. I think it just speaks to the pent-up demand. So, but we'll certainly, as we have a clearer picture of what that looks like for Travel to Australia, we'll certainly share any insights or projections.
Cool, thank you. And thank you, Lindy, for letting me know that I'm a bit quieter than everyone else. So I've just turned the volume up, so hopefully you guys can hear me a bit better now. Okay, so other questions we've got here are, I think it's John Dyer. His question is, what are the current restrictions on US citizens traveling internationally? Are Americans currently traveling to other international destinations, or are they sitting tight or not permitted? I think that's probably a question we could spend 10 minutes answering because it's so complicated. But Jane, or I don't know, Jane or Chris, do you want to take that one?
I suppose, yeah, it is complicated. I mean, the short answer is yes, they can. I think, Americans are permitted to travel. It does vary though, depending on, the state and where they are, because in some cases there are quarantine restrictions on re-entry, but not across the board. So I think the US government's moved to, instead of a blanket ban, it's travel advisories, for specific destinations. So the short answer is yes, they can, but there are some variable restrictions depending on, that may involve quarantine on return.
Cool, thanks, Jane. Okay, so Dean Hampel has a question here. Which we might come back to you independently on, Dean, but the question is, what were the top regions for US travellers into Australia pre-COVID? What are the trends for destinations within Australia for the US traveller moving forward? And is TA is TAA planning on pushing marketing certain destinations within Australia over others? It's quite a lot on that one. I don't know, Jane, if you want to answer that in summary, we can maybe provide Dean with some follow-up, or Jackie.
In terms of promoting specific destinations within Australia, I think, no, I mean, I think really across the board. I mean, I think at the moment, the focus, for example, in the domestic campaign that Tourism Australia is running at the moment is supporting those regions that are typically most visited by international visitors, and encouraging, you know, Australians to think more broadly about a vacation and, you know, a different type of vacation, and or an extra vacation, or spending longer and visiting some of those destinations, and having some of those experiences that normally international visitors you know, favour. So I think, you know, we'll certainly, you know, be looking at supporting those destinations and experiences. But I think at the moment, you know, there's kind of a broad need for recovery, I suppose, in the recovery stage across many destinations.
Yeah, and I would say, in addition to that, we are working closely with a lot of the bushfire affected areas as well to try to drive tourism there. So coming on to 1 year since the major bushfires happening across all of Australia, we've really have been leaning into the messages of recovering to try to continue to help those areas and support those areas. But from a product standpoint, a lot of what we know travelers are currently looking for a domestic standpoint also apply to a lot of the offerings that Australia has. So big, wide open spaces, beaches, etc. So we have a really, really strong product available on the ground that will tap into what consumers are really looking for now.
Cool, thanks, Jackie. Next one here we have is from Tony Shari. Hi, Tony. His question is, are we likely to see the US or Canada be able to travel to Australia first?
Again, I don't think we have, I mean, we can't really put any definitive timeline or even, you know, a sequencing of how our different international border restrictions may be lifted. So unfortunately, it's whether there's any difference in the timeline between the two countries. I think it's too early to tell.
Yeah, cool. Brian Hennessy has another question. So his other question is, do we anticipate the outcome of the US election affecting consumer sentiment and intent to travel? Jackie, do you want to tackle that one?
I would say it's fair to say that the US election definitely is taking a large share of voice in the US across all the major news outlets, and it will have an impact on consumer sentiment and intention to travel for sure. We've seen changes in sentiment even occurring just after the recent debates that have gone on, so we would expect that trend to continue.
Cool, thank you. Quick one here from Mike. Again, Mike, are there any plans for ATE next year? So we are working very hard in the background on what our plans for ATE look like next year. Our anticipation is to be able to communicate that within the normal timeframes of when we'd be communicating ATE. So we'd normally be making some announcements around that in December. And I still think that is the plan, to communicate what our intention is on ATE. So look out for that. Nothing further we can share at this stage on that, but I would say we will expect to make some information available on that before the Christmas holiday vacation period on that one. There's a couple of questions in here broadly around pricing and value. So I think just on that one, and Jane, jump in. I think on that one, I think the core message from our industry partners in Australia is really around the fact that I guess to support recovery, there's a very fine line between stimulating demand with incentives versus ensuring that businesses remain profitable. You know, I think many of our partners in Australia have had a significant period of hibernation in some instances, severely reduced operations in many instances across the country. And I think the core message from our industry in Australia is that right here, right now, many of our businesses are really focused on making sure they maintain their business viability, and therefore their ability and opportunity to provide discounting in the very short term is severely limited. So I would say, and Jane, correct me if I'm wrong, that we don't want to be setting a false expectation of a flood of significant value necessarily in terms of when Australia does open its borders, because of the overall context. And I think, you know, the reality is we'll probably see some of that, but to have a significant expectation of widespread opportunities of that, I would say we're probably not messaging that at this stage. Jane, would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, business viability will be key, and so it will be, you know, individual operators will need to determine what that looks like for their businesses. But you know, obviously it's been a very difficult period for many. So you know, a focus on you know, a sustainable recovery will be key.
Yeah. And I think, and Stacey, I hope that answered your question, but also just to, I guess, talk about the value of the North American travel. I think many of our industry partners that are on this webinar today from Australia would still regard North America as a premium rich market in terms of the yield and revenue that can be achieved from consumers coming from this market. And until we have signals otherwise, I would say that many of our partners would still be looking at this market for that type of customer, I think, going forward.
Yeah, and historically, our consumer research certainly shows that you know, Australia ranks very high in terms of value for money, in terms of the perspective of the North American market. So, I mean, we would anticipate that, you know, that would continue to be the case in a post-COVID world.
Yeah, cool. Okay, what else do we have here? So we're coming to the end now, which is good. So we've probably got another 5 minutes if there's any more questions from anyone. So I'm just going to read a couple here. Pete asking, hi Peter, he's asking if we can just provide a quick update on the various domestic state border opening or situation as we see it at the moment, if anyone has that to hand.
Yeah, I think it does vary. I think certainly most you know, states are targeting a reopening of domestic borders in December. And then there are various arrangements between each of the states, depending on, you know, the situation and various thresholds, I suppose, that need to be met, you know, to reopen, you know, bilaterally border restrictions. So the best place to keep up to date with that is australia.com. So we will continue to post there, you know, developments in terms of domestic borders and any information that people need to know about that there.
Cool, thanks. Question here from Jane, just around the Trans-Tasman. Jane from London Travel. Hi, Jane. Question on the Trans-Tasman bubble. So Jane's comment is just around what's the expectation of how long the Tasman bubble might need to be in place for before we look at increasing more green lanes, and or is the piece really around a widely available vaccine before borders can open? So I guess there's a couple of things in there possibly.
So there's not a definitive time frame for opening or how long a green lane needs to be in place to you know, to reopen other markets at this point. I think it is fluid. As I mentioned, I think Minister Birmingham has said for markets like the US, you know, it will take a vaccine or significant breakthrough in the management. It's just, we don't know what that looks like. But certainly the reopening of domestic and any other, you know, safe travel markets that reopen, such as New Zealand, obviously provide sort of information and a blueprint for reopening safely. So of course, you know, as travel does reopen domestically into any green lane markets, it will only help inform that approach to safely reopen other markets.
Cool, thank you. A couple of last questions. So one here from Colette. So hi Colette, your question is, will there be a push for consumers to seek out Premier Aussie specialists to help them plan their trips in 2021 and 2022? So I think there's a couple of pieces there, Colette. So one is our digital team based in Sydney are doing a really big piece of work at the moment around Australia.com and how we help customers navigate through Australia.com and how we surface not just all of the inspiration content to consumers when they're coming into Australia.com, but how we also then surface when we do have offers on the website, and then how we also then best connect customers with a strong intent to travel with an advisor like a Premier Aussie specialist. So that is work that's ongoing at the moment. So I think we we'll see some changes there, and which I think when we do have the borders open again and we're just marketing the destination more significantly and people are very much in that planning mindset, I think we'll see more of a stronger opportunity for consumers to connect with valued groups of agents like our Premier Aussie specialists. Jackie, I don't know if you have anything in addition to add to that.
You pretty much hit the nail on the head. We are seeing as one of the expected consumer trends that people will be requiring and reaching out to advisors just to help navigate the complexity of travel in a post-COVID world, but also just as a way to provide additional insurance, and then also to have an understanding of what the safest ways to travel are and what the safest destinations are. Luckily, like Jane mentioned, we are often ranked as good value for money, but we are also continuously ranked as one of the safest destinations in the minds of consumers as well, which is a really big benefit to Australia.
Awesome.
So I think
Thank
it's why we, you know, really believe in putting as much effort into really sort of promoting the Aussie Specialist Program and our virtual, distribution engagement initiatives through this period. And as soon as we do have a timeline to reopen, we'll move that messaging and really put a focus on making sure that all of the advisors in our network are armed with all the information that they need to sell with confidence and provide that reassurance to rebuild consumer confidence to travel to Australia. So that'll be a really key focus in the recovery phase.
Cool. Okay, last question is from Adam. Hi, Adam Ogle. His question is, with youth travellers and the working holiday market being expected to be among the first to bounce back globally, is there a double down focus in these segments within North America?
Yeah, so our core target audience, I suppose, that we will be focusing on is the high value traveller, but there are global work streams across Tourism Australia looking at the opportunity for youth travel and also for visiting friends and relatives. So we definitely see that there are opportunities in those segments out of the North America market, along with, as I mentioned, premium travel, which is also another segment that we expect to be strong coming out of this situation from North America. So yes, we are looking at what the opportunities are from the North American markets as part of those global work streams.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Well, I think that concludes the Q&A. There's a couple there that we didn't come to, and I've purposely left them. So we'll, for those of you that have asked specific questions that we haven't answered, we'll follow up with you offline. But Alva, just to answer your question, yes. So all of the sessions across Marketplace are being recorded and they'll be made available back in the auditorium for you guys to view on demand and download afterwards. So they will definitely be there for you guys. So thanks for all your questions. We will leave it with Jane to wrap things up.
So just a quick reminder. So tomorrow we kick off Australia Marketplace with an opening session, opening remarks from Harrison in the morning. Then we have from 1 to 4 p.m. Pacific time appointments, and then a future of aviation session with Qantas, United and Brisbane Airport. So please do tune in for that. So again, just wanted to thank you. We completely understand how difficult this time is for all of you, and we really appreciate your continued commitment to Australia and your investment of your time and your effort to continuing to engage with Australia. So hopefully you find this event over the next 2 weeks to be of good value. We really welcome any feedback that you have throughout and after the event. So please do provide any feedback, and we wish we were meeting with you in person, and we hope that we get the opportunity to do that sooner rather than later. But in the meantime, thank you, and please enjoy Australia Marketplace. All the best and take care.